So good evening and welcome everyone to the City of Lake Forest Park City Council regular meeting for Thursday, January 8th, 2026. Welcome to our new members of the council. Thank you for your willingness to serve. I will call the meeting to order and I also will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. I'd entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So moved. Second. Never not.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you, Council. I'd like to start by thanking our returning council members and also thanking our newly elected council members, re-elected council members, new council members. It is not an easy task to sit in elected office these days, and these folks who sit up here represent the best of our community when it comes to their commitments to all of the best that we can do in this community. It's not an easy thing for them to sit here. It's a huge time commitment. It's also quite stressful at times. And I thank them deeply for their commitment to this city, to democracy, and to the greater good of our region and our country. So every time I see a sign that says, thank a civil servant or thank a federal employee, I always think of also please thank an elected official at whatever level you can, because it's not easy to do. So I do thank you for that. With that, we're going to move on to the council organizational meeting. And just the way this works is in my role as mayor, I will run, if you will, the election of the deputy mayor. And then after that, whomever is elected to that position, I will hand the gavel over to them to run the remainder of the elections and the various procedures for appointments to regional bodies, et cetera. So that's the way it is listed in our governance manual, and that's how we will proceed. So with that, I would like to open the nominations for deputy mayor, council chair.
Governance manual first. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have to adopt the. I'm too enthusiastic about this. Excuse me. We have to go back. We have to adopt the procedures first. So I'd like to entertain a motion for adoption of the City Council Governance Manual.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt the City Council Governance Manual. All those in favor? Yes, please.
And I want to make a quick comment, a reminder to the city council as well as to basically the members of the public that the governance manual will be setting up a subcommittee to basically review some of the small changes that we need to make to it. So this is not a forever, it's a living document. And so recall that basically we're trying to make it better and better. So keep that in mind.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fertani. Any further comments? All those in favor of adoption of the City Council Governance Manual, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Guys have it. Thank you, folks. Okay, now we're moving on to the election of deputy mayor and vice chair. We will start with the deputy mayor, and then I will hand the gavel over to whomever is elected. I would entertain a motion for nominations for the position of deputy mayor and council chair. Councilmember Riddle.
I would like to nominate Councilmember Fertani as deputy mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Riddle. Councilmember Fertani has been nominated for deputy mayor. Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other nominations for the position of deputy mayor? Okay. Would you like a vote or would you like to do it through unanimous consent? Let's do a vote. All those in favor of deputy mayor, Councilmember Fertani as deputy mayor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Congratulations, deputy mayor.
Sir.
Welcome. Again. And I will hand this over to you
Okay.
to carry on with the council vice chair.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, council. Well, I'm very honored by your selection of me as your leader, and as such, my first act is going to be finding a vice chair. So I now open the nominations for the position of council vice chair. Okay. Deputy Councilmember Riddle, sorry. Is
I would love to nominate Councilmember Goldman for the position of vice chair.
there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other nominations for the position of vice chair? All right, then I guess we'll do the same thing. So all those in favor of Councilmember Goldman being elected to the position of vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right, there are a couple more positions we have to fill. One of them is, of course, the Business and Finance Committee, which is one of the major committees that the council has. It's the one in charge of the budget, as the mayor said, and in fact, has duties of overseeing the budget throughout the 2 years that the budget is in force and planning for the next one. So, do I hear any nominations for the office of the Business and Finance Chair?
I would like to nominate Councilmember Riddle as Chair of the Budget and Finance Committee.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, are there any other nominations for that position? Seeing none, we'll go straight to the vote. All right, all those in favor of Councilmember Riddle becoming the Budget and Finance Committee Chair, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, I heard everyone, so thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you all.
Okay, and finally, we come to the Budget and Finance Chair, Budget and Finance Committee Vice Chair. Do I hear nominations for that position?
I would like to nominate Councilmember Good as the Budget and Finance Committee Vice Chair.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, are there any other nominations for that position? Seeing none, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor of Councilmember Good becoming the Budget and Finance Committee Vice Chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Congratulations. All right, and I don't know if we elect the last member. I don't think we.
No, you just go through the list
Okay.
and say that
All right.
these individuals have indicated an interest in this position. Are there any other additional?
Absolutely. Okay. So there are 3 members of the Budget and Finance Committee for most of its existence. And so I'd like to put forth Matt Muhlenberg, Councilmember Muhlenberg's name as the 3rd member of the Budget and Finance Committee. Are there any other members of City Council who would like to be on the committee? Okay, seeing none. Councilmember Muhlenberg, you're the 3rd member of the Budget and Finance Committee.
Right.
Thank you for stepping up. Okay, so we also have liaisons to various commissions and boards for the city. The primary one, Planning Commission, which basically does a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the city codes on zoning and parking and all kinds of things like that. They do work with housing and certainly work with our community development director closely. I wanted to basically ask council members Rosno and Councilmember Good, you'd had a discussion about basically the liaison. Okay, have you come to a
I don't think we
decision?
came up with any decision, but
Okay, then we're going to put that one off until next time then, okay? Next one is the tree board. Vice Chair Goldman, you'd put your name forth as basically being a liaison to the tree board. Are there any other council members interested in that position? Okay, you are now the liaison to the council, to the tree board. All right, Councilmember Rosno, you put your name forth as a liaison to the Parks and Recreation Board. Are there any other members who are interested in that position?
I have a question.
Councilmember Muhlenberg.
If Josh fills that position, can somebody be the liaison to 2 committees?
That's a good question.
You
Yeah,
can,
you can.
yes.
Yeah,
As long
exactly. That's right. You did. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes, they can.
Would it,
Go ahead.
would it make sense to defer both the Planning Commission and Parks Board until our next meeting?
That would be fine by me. I think part of the issue is scheduling, and it may be that the schedules of those both match up and we flip a coin or something. So
That's fair.
okay, yeah, let's hold.
All right. So we'll put off the Parks and Rec Board liaison to next time as well. Okay, so the next list I'm going to read is fairly extensive. It's basically for various regional bodies. Okay, so starting with the Sound Cities Association or SCA ones. Let's see. I think for the Public Issues Committee, I've put my name forth for the for that committee. And I believe Vice Chair Goldman, you also did too.
As the alternate.
As the alternate. Okay, very good. Are there any other members of council who are interested in the pick board? All right, seeing none, I guess we're going to do that then. Okay, all right. Oh, sorry, I apologize. Got it. Yeah. Okay, so I've just basically confirmed the appointment of myself and Councilmember Goldman as the voting member and the alternate for the Sound Cities Association Public Issues Committee. Thank you. All right, next one we have is the Seashore Transportation, which is not a SCA board, but basically it's also an important regional body. We have two seats and an alternate.
Correct.
Okay, and I think we have Vice Chair Goldman, Mayor French as the two voting members. Okay, and Councilmember Rosano as the alternate. I got nods from that. Anybody else interested? All right, seeing none, those folks are now appointed to the Seashore Transportation. Thank you. Thank you for serving on. That's a really important one. For those of you who don't know what that does, they basically we're part of the North County group that determines basically some advisory positions on transportation issues. And so we're in a group with Seattle, Shoreline, and just us. So it's one of the few boards where we have equal weight as Seattle does, which is pretty amazing. Okay, the next one is the Lake Ballinger Forum, the Lake Ballinger McAleer Creek Watershed Forum, to give its full name. Councilmember Good, you were interested in that position? Okay, great. Isn't there anybody else interested in that position? There can also be an alternate as well. Right, seeing none, you're now appointed. Okay, let's see. RIA 8, which is the Water Resources Inventory Area 8 Advisory Board. I think basically Councilmember Good and Councilmember Muhlenberg, you were interested in the position. Did you decide who was the voting member and who was the alternate?
Councilmember Good would be the voting member.
Okay.
What one is this?
All right.
Why
Is there
were
any?
Oh, Ira.
One to do?
Yeah.
I thought you were.
Oh, I'm happy to.
Yeah,
Either way.
yeah. Well, that-
Okay, are we good?
I guess I'm going to take the primary lead and she's going to remain in the alternate
Okay,
position.
fair enough. All right.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. All right, very good. So anybody else interested in RIA 8? All right, seeing none. Congratulations. Okay. All right, so the North King County Coalition on Homelessness Board, I think Councilmember Riddle, you're going to continue in that role?
I will, but I would be happy to step down if folks find time in their schedule to step
Okay.
into that role
All right. So until that point, then we'll make that decision when that happens.
when that happens.
Okay.
But for now, yes, you can put me as
Okay,
the
great.
member.
Okay, then the King County Cities for Climate Coalition or collaboration. I guess I'm going to be continuing as the voting member, and Councilmember or Vice Chair Goldman, you said you'd be the alternate?
Or I think where that one is an alternate, or are there two members?
Oh, there are two members. You're right. Yeah. So we'll both be voting members. All right. So anybody else interested in the K4C? Okay, great. I guess we're it then. Okay. All right. And then Racer, which is the regional, I'm always going to get the name wrong. Crisis Response. Thank you. Regional Crisis Response Board. I think Councilmember Saunders and Councilmember Rosano, have you decided the alternate voting member one?
Oh, I was going to be the primary.
Okay, the primary, and then Councilmember Rosano, the alternate? Okay, great. Anybody else interested in that board? Okay, so congratulations. All right. And then finally, the Evergreen Communities Steering Committee. Councilmember Riddle, I know that that committee may be on its way up, but are you willing to serve? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay,
Mhm.
great. Did we do NUSA?
We didn't have anybody for NUSA, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fertani and Council. Thank you for your willingness to serve. For the edification of the folks in the chambers is also online. There was some of these positions that were listed are independently applied for, and so additionally there are opportunities with Sound Cities Association, various committees and boards coming up in the fall that will be taking applications for those. So as we get, I'm going to bring this closer. I apologize, folks. As we get closer to, as we get farther into the year, we'll make sure everybody's aware of these opportunities so that those of you who are new to the group or maybe been unaware of some of these opportunities, and new ones come up all the time. So I think we'll see some new ones also through the county with the new county executive in place, Mr. Zilak. And I'm really looking forward to this year and all of you serving on these as liaisons and boards and committees. It's really important work. And as you all know, there are far more opportunities than we have people to contribute. So the work that you do is very important on the ones that we can work with. With that, we're going to move on to public comments. Happy New Year, Chief.
Happy New Year.
I am. Oh, yeah, it's here. Thank you. I will be reading the statement. Public comments. The council will not be accepting online public comments. This portion of the agenda is set aside for the public to address the council on agenda items or any other topic the council might have purview or control over. However, the mayor or council may not respond to comments from the public. If the comments are of a nature that the council does not have influence or control over, then the mayor or presiding officer may request the speaker to suspend their comments. The council may direct staff to follow up on items brought up by the public. Comments are limited to a 3-minute time limit. With that, we will open public comment. I'm supposed to do this, so I guess I'll do it gently. Okay, the only person we have here is Minda Martin. Did you want to speak? Or you'll have the opportunity to speak for your confirmation too. Okay. If you have general public comments, you're absolutely welcome anytime. Please, you're signed up. Yeah, please join us at the podium.
I just want to say thank you for your service. I really value each and every one of you. And I know that public service is you're very vulnerable in this moment, regardless of where you stand politically. It's a very vulnerable moment. The last comment I just wanted to say is if the city council has any preparation or concerns about ICE in the neighborhood, federal agents, you all are aware of the shooting just recently. And I'm just curious if there is like a plan of how we will address and protect our citizens here from, something like that is horrible happening in Lake Forest Park. That's all.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate that. We can certainly follow up with you on information regarding that topic. Are there any other members of the public and council chambers that would like to speak? This is a very energetic group tonight. Nothing to get riled up about yet. Oh, come on. All right. With that, I will close public comments. I guess we're good there. Thank you very much, everybody. All right, and we're moving on to a proclamation, a very, very important one. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Whereas the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. has inspired this country and the world with his vision and dedication to freedom and equality. And whereas Martin Luther King Jr. became the voice of American civil rights, the American civil rights movement in the 1960s, 50s, and 60s with eloquent speeches and nonviolent action that resulted in landmark legislation, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And whereas Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4th, 1968 at 39 years of age. And whereas the voice of Martin Luther King Jr. was not silenced, and his faith and courage in proclaiming the message of liberty and justice for all lives on. And whereas federal legislation signed into law on November 2nd, 1983 established a legal holiday to be celebrated on the third Monday in January, honoring the life of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., who was born on January 15th, 1929. Now, therefore, the mayor and the city council of the city of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim Monday, January 19th, 2026 as Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the city of Lake Forest Park and urge all residents to join in this special observance. Signed this 8th day of January, 2026. More important than ever. Okay, I'm going to give that back to you. Sign it later. Moving on to the consent calendar, folks. Again, for everybody's edification, these are items that are non-controversial and that are generally perfunctory. And I'd entertain a motion for adoption of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt the consent calendar. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, it's adopted by unanimous consent. Thank you very much, council. Sure, I'm here. Moving on to the fun part. Final confirmation. Appointing Ross Baarslag-Benson to Lake Forest Park Tree Board position number 1, partial term. Ross, welcome. Would you like to say a few words to the council and take a couple of questions?
Just a few hours ago, I was working with 2 teenagers repairing the chess pieces for the mall.
Oh.
And I mentioned the tree board and was trying to think about ways to get young people excited about what we have here. And what we came up with was the idea of combining orienteering, where you have certain places that you have to find in a certain amount of time. And the idea was that we could have different trees listed. And not only do they have to find the tree, but they would have to identify what kind of tree it is.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
I'm ready for your questions.
Also, colleagues, any questions for Ross? Yes, please, Councilmember Vice Chair Goldman.
Yeah, so first, thank you for your willingness to serve on the tree board. My question is, so one of the core duties of the tree board is educating the public about the value of trees and proper tree maintenance, tree care. Do you have any thoughts on ways that we can more effectively communicate with the public about trees?
I think that continuing to join the farmers markets is a great way to do it. And also, one thing I've noticed is that there's some beautiful big trees in the different neighborhoods that have ivy on them. And I think going around and just talking to the homeowners, a group of us a year ago found the trees right next to the fire station, were just almost completely covered with ivy. And so we just knocked on the door and said, hey, would you like some help? And they said, oh yeah, we're just renters, so go ahead. And so we cut down a bunch of the ivy that was encircling the trees, and things like that I think can make a difference.
Thank you. Councilmember Good.
Speaking of that and ivy removal, have you thought of maybe accepting lists of trees or properties that need help with ivy removal? And so they're, you can prioritize or go through a list.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of groups that have a shared interest. I mean, this Saturday, there's going to be ivy removal at 5 Acre Wood, and I've been part of that for a long time. And then stream keepers go into different places. So maybe we can help coordinate some of those efforts and especially get some teenagers involved with all their energy.
Because I can think of a creek that needs some ivy removal.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Roosevelt.
Your cover letter, hi Ross.
Hi.
You mentioned as you were canvassing that you got a lot of questions in the community about tree code and all the processes around that. I wonder if you wanted to share some of the questions that you'd heard and just get it. I mean, I certainly got a lot of those as I was talking to people around the community and learned a lot about what trees people have and what they're trying to do with them. But if there was anything that jumps out in your memory as especially, if you'll pardon the pun, thorny question that you had to field and that you might want to learn more about.
Yeah, I remember Sally Yamasaki and I were doorbelling a couple years ago, and a gentleman near her house was complaining that the roots of big Douglas fir tree were messing up the asphalt of his driveway, and it was his yard and his tree, and why couldn't he cut it down? And my suggestion was, well, why not just put in some gravel and just let things come to an equilibrium. But I didn't know enough about how all that worked and what was the best solution. So hopefully by joining the board, I'll talk to some experts and find out better answers to that question.
Colleagues, any other questions? Right, I'm going to entertain a motion for final adoption.
Yeah, I'd like to move to appoint Ross Baarslag-Benson to the Lake Forest Park Tree Board, position number 1.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to appoint Ross Baarslag-Benson to the Lake Forest Park Tree Board, position number 1, a partial term. Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it. Congratulations, Ross. Thank you for your willingness. Okay, moving on to Minda Martin, to the Lake Forest Park Tree Board alternate. Welcome again.
Hi.
Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you for having me. I am Minda Martin. I have been a resident of Lake Forest Park for over 10 years. I am a first-time homeowner when I came here. And I fell in love with this neighborhood because of the trees, the community, the walkability. And I had a really scary car accident in 2019 that left me with a severe concussion. And I noticed that the trees were helping my headaches. And during that healing process, I found this deep love for the trees and did all this workshops, restoration workshops here through the Stewardship Foundation. I did work parties, volunteer work parties at Grace Cole Park. And the more time I spent under those trees, the more I just fastly, recovered. And I wanted to take that kind of lived experience and somehow create educational compendiums and materials for communities where mental health issues or physical health issues, and bring that to them, and how valuable like time under these trees can, it's not just the canopy of like shade, and there's also all these like other kinds of possibilities for it. So that's what brings me here, is that passion for the trees.
Wonderful. Thank you. Colleagues, questions for Ms. Martin? Yes, Vice Chair Goldman.
Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for your willingness to serve. I will ask you the same question.
Sure.
Do you have thoughts on ways that we can more effectively communicate and educate the community about the value of trees and tree maintenance?
Yeah, I do. I'm a filmmaker. I've thought about like little short videos about different trees that you can access through a link online or through a QR code. But more importantly, really getting to community is, I loved your story, Ross, about reaching out to knocking on the doors, because that's also the most for renters and for getting connected to property owners, but also to real estate agents. When we moved into our house, we had no idea what to do with all these giant trees. We were really kind of scared. Are they going to fall on our house? Are they going to, tree codes were kind of terrifying too in their own rights. So you didn't know what to do. You didn't want to cut a branch. And a lot of that's just ignorance and just not knowing. And so there should be like, a rich compendium material that we can give to real estate agents, give to landowners, and say, this are the trees here. This is why they're important. This is what you can do with them. This is how you can care for them. You see ivy and it's growing up, it's blocking the light of the trees, explaining in just easy terms why they are so important why they're significant, why this isn't, isn't just a scary tree code, but this is when you cut down a tree like this, why do you do it? And I think the more we can give education to people, the better off everyone will be. Because at the end of the day, if somebody just wants to cut down their trees to have a bigger parking lot and they know all that information, it's a different story than someone who just doesn't know and they need to do it. Yeah. Any other questions?
Deputy Mayor Tony.
And thank you for your willingness to serve. As a fellow filmmaker, I heard your story and I said, wow, instead of basically the infinite loop we have on Channel 21 right now on the public access TV, wouldn't
There
it be
you go.
great if we could tell some of these kind of stories? So I appreciated your comments about doing the outreach, just not in a standard, written format, but also using video, using sound. And I think, your addition to the tree board will really bring a different aspect of how to do the outreach. And I really appreciate your stepping up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any
Call
other
to any
questions?
Okay, I'd entertain a motion for final confirmation of appointing Minda Martin to the Lake Forest Park Tree Board as an alternate.
I would like to propose an amendment to the motion.
Oh, yes.
Do we need to adopt, or guess
I
what's
will
the-
withdraw my motion. Go ahead.
I
didn't make.
would like to amend it so that we are appointing Minda Martin as a member of the tree board rather than an alternate.
That's right. I apologize. Obviously, I didn't make a motion, but nobody made a motion.
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to amend the appointment of Minda Martin to a full member of the tree board, but rather than alternate.
And did you want me to speak to my amendment?
Please do.
So the tree board met last night. As of next month, they will have 2 vacancies, and there are 3 people who applied for the board at very much the same time. And the tree board didn't want to have to pick and choose which 2 of them would be members and 1 alternate, so they would much rather have them all be members in good standing.
Oh, that's great. Great. It's been moved and seconded well, there was no motion
To amend.
We'll start with the motion to amend and then we'll do the actual final confirmation. That's okay. Any questions or comments on the motion to amend?
I have one question. Minda, is that okay with you?
Yeah, happy. Thank you. Thanks for checking with me.
Good question.
Yeah, the more the merrier.
All those in favor of amending the final confirmation to a full position in the Lake Forest Park Tree Board, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it. Passes unanimously. I'd entertain a motion for final confirmation.
I move that we confirm Minda Martin to the tree board as a member.
Second. Moved and seconded to for final confirmation to appoint Minda Martin to the tree board. Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Ayes have it. Congratulations. Welcome. Yes. You must be rusty after the holidays. Normally I ask tree board candidates to tell us about their favorite trees, so I'll bug you guys about that later. I'm sure you have them, or maybe multiple favorite trees. All right. Well, thank you all for being willing to serve. We're working very hard to make sure that we get our boards and commissions fully staffed with good volunteers, and you all are wonderful candidates. Thank you so much for being willing to serve. We're going to move on to ordinances and resolutions for introduction and referral. The first one is, there's only one actually here. Resolution 26-2054, authorizing the mayor to sign the Washington State Department of Ecology 2025-2027 Water Quality Stormwater Capacity Agreement. Chris Corwell. Welcome, Chris.
Good evening, council members, Mr. Mayor. I'm coming before you tonight to highlight this resolution, asking the mayor to authorize Ecology Capacity Grant, which is a stormwater funding opportunity we are given every 2 years. This year's grant amount is $120,000. We can use that towards any of our stormwater permit activities. It has to be related to our NPDES stormwater permit. Without it, we would be searching for funding to do some of these vital tasks. I'm here to answer any questions you have.
Colleagues, any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor, did you want to talk about procedural things regarding?
Sure. Okay, well, I was going to ask.
Oh, go for that first, and
Mr.
then we'll
Corwell
talk
some
about
questions. Yeah.
procedural. Yeah.
Well, thanks for your presentation and description. From the note, the legislative note attached to the resolution, I'm wondering. Okay, so a significant amount of this money is going to be spent on inspections of the stormwater system.
It could be. That is the most obvious need we have for it. Other needs I've sort of identified are mapping related to stormwater. I think we have room to improve those processes, but the catch basin work is required, and we are accruing bills now. So.
Right. And we as a city don't have the personnel to literally do those kind of inspections, so we hire out, and that's where the money really goes to.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Questions, colleagues, for Mr. Corwell? Any additional? Councilmember Riddle.
Is there any urgency to this ask?
That's a good question. Thank you for your question. I would like to secure this funding sooner rather than later, as we're getting invoices from consultants. That would be the only sense of urgency. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Right. And then I have one final.
Please, I'm sorry.
How about-
Unless there's a question.
Yes, Councilmember Rosen.
I just, it says this year it's 120,000. It was 130,000 previously. Is that just workload differences or?
I think that the Department of Ecology had a tighter budget. It's just a uniform amount they give to any city with the type of permit that we have. I don't actually know the reasoning behind that.
Thank you. Yeah, Deputy Mayor Furton.
So basically, just to summarize for everybody, this is a motion or a resolution to accept money. Okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, how would you like to proceed
All right. So,
with this or
yeah,
teaching moment?
So here's the teaching moment, which is that we've been getting comments from members of the public that the three-touch rule seems to be ignored a lot. We don't ignore it. We, of course, have to make a motion to waive the three-touch rule. And it, these are typically non-controversial and urgent things, kind of like this, where the work of the city gets delayed if we have to wait 2 weeks for the second touch and then a further 2 weeks for the third touch. So in some instances, there could be a delay of a month, which really does delay what the staff are doing. So my proposal is that when we do a three-touch waive rule, instead of just basically passing the resolution right then and there, we put it on the consent calendar for the next meeting. So there's a full 2 weeks before basically the motion carries, literally, the resolution is approved. So with your permission, I'd like to do this in this case here.
In other words, to bring us back on the consent calendar for the next session if everyone's amenable to this.
Right. So what I'm going to, I'll make the motion then. I move that we waive the three-touch rule for Resolution 26-2054, authorizing the mayor to sign the Washington State Department of Ecology 2025 to 2027 Water Quality Stormwater Capacity Agreement and place it on the consent calendar for the next meeting.
Second.
I'm not even going to try to repeat what you said. It's been moved and seconded to waive the three-touch rule regarding Resolution 26-2054 and place it on the consent calendar for the subsequent meeting in 2 weeks. All those any questions or comments? And Vice Chair Goldman.
I'm fine. I have no objections to it. Something I would point out, this is more procedural on our end. I would just point out that items D, E, and F in tonight's consent agenda were first touches. So I'm not actually sure that it was necessary for us to have the motion. I think this might be one of those things that when we're revising the governance manual, we make this process that for things that we're accepting money, it's completely non-controversial. We just make it a routine that we consider it open, we consider it as a specific item the first time. And then if there's no objections or questions, it automatically goes onto the consent agenda. But as for the actual motion, I'm totally in favor of it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of suspending the three-touch rule on resolution 25-2054 and placing it in the consent calendar for subsequent meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you, council. Appreciate that. So we'll get it done in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Chris. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your time. Okay, ordinances and resolutions for action. Resolution 26-2056, authorizing the mayor to sign amendments 2 and 3 to the interlocal cooperation agreement between King County and the City of Lake Forest Park for conservation future funded open space acquisition project. Administrator Hill, you're online, and I apologize. I was meant to mention that you were online at the beginning of the meeting, but welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, Council, and welcome to our new council members. As the Mayor suggested, this is following the acquisition of the city's acquisition of the property for the expansion of 5 Acre Woods Park. The administration applied to King County Conservation Futures Grant Program to reimburse the city for 75% of the purchase price. The purchase price was $1.6 million. The city was subsequently awarded $1,284,551 to reimburse the acquisition and $150,000 for future site stabilization costs. The total amount being reimbursed is slightly above 75%, and that's because of qualifying staff and appraisal costs. We're able to roll into that dollar amount. So we got some of the work done paid for as well. The funds for acquisition will be accounted for in the Capital Improvement Fund, and that is a fund which we use to pay for the purchase of this property. Before council tonight are 2 amendments to the current interlocal cooperation agreement with King County Conservation Futures interlocal agreement. Allocations. Amendment 2 changes the terms of the ILA. One of those changes is allowing proceeds to be used for site stabilization activities, as well as acquisition costs. When the city originally entered into this ILA, site stabilization costs were not a qualifying reimbursable amount. And then Amendment 2 also provides for King County Code exceptions to the required appraisal review and requires a 25% matching contribution to the city. And in the event the status of the property changes, it allows for a combination of land and cash to be used to reimburse the county. So just a few changes to the existing interlocal. And then Amendment 3 allocates the total dollars of $1,434,551 to the city. Just for clarification, the roughly just under $1.3 million for the acquisition will come to the city once this is executed. The $150,000 for site stabilization cost is a reimbursement basis that would be in future years. And are there any questions for me tonight?
Deputy Refer Tony.
So to put this in a nutshell, and good evening, Administrator Hill, that we are getting money again.
Correct.
Right.
And to your point earlier, Deputy Mayor, we are not in a rush. King County is excited to wrap up this contract with us, but a 2-week delay would not cause any issues for this process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Colleagues, any other questions for Mr. Councilmember Rosenau?
2 questions, I guess they're related. One is, I should know this probably, but site stabilization means?
Is anything to do with bringing the site into compliance with the Conservation Futures grant. So any work we have to do on site, we would get reimbursed up to $150,000 for that work.
And this amendment only covers this property, or is it a general change to the relationship?
No, the amendments to the interlocal agreement are across the board. So if we purchase another property and ask for reimbursement from Conservation Futures, it would apply there as well. We could make the same type of application.
Colleagues, any other questions for Administrator Hill? Okay. I would like to just make a quick comment. Thank you very much, Administrator Hill. I know it was a big lift to make application for this reimbursement. This is, I hope that we continue to have this kind of acquisition and reimbursement as a model for future parks and open spaces throughout our community. My fervent hope is we will reinvest the $1.2 million right back into the mix again. And as you all know, we have a long list of potential parcels for consideration for environmental and also recreational purposes. So we love to use other people's money for this. So again, many thanks to the staff and thanks Administrator Hill. So we'll be bringing this back to council in 2 weeks. Deputy Mayor Furtani.
Well, it is under ordinances and resolution for action, so I want to make a motion to
As you will.
approve a resolution to waive the three-touch rule on Resolution 2056, authorizing the mayor to sign amendments 2 and 3 to the interlocal cooperation agreement between King County and the City of Lake Forest Park for conservation futures funded open space acquisition projects, and to place it on the consent calendar for next time, for the next meeting.
Okay, it's been moved and
Second.
there we go. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to waive the three-touch rule regarding Resolution 262056 and place it on the consent calendar of the following meeting. Any questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Furtani.
Yes, and like Vice Chair Goldman, I'm going to speak to this motion that, in fact, this is a non-controversial one where we are accepting a reimbursement from the county and changing slightly some of the workings of the where the funding can go. And so there's given the questions that I just heard, I think that non-controversial is a fair way to say it, though there is some urgency to it as well. So
thank you, Deputy Mayor. I was just, Director Vaughn will be proud of me. I was trying to do the math of 2 weeks of interest on 1.2 million. I'll leave that to smarter minds than me. All those in favor of suspending the three-touch rule on Resolution 262056 and place it on the consent calendar, the subsequent council meeting, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Ayes have it. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you, Administrator Hill. And then we have, let me scroll down here. There's a million pages on this. Let's see. Geez. Oh, there we go. Finally got it. Okay. We are amended the Resolution 262058, authorizing the mayor to sign the King County Parks Property Tax Levy Agreement for 2026-2031. Wow. And this is Corey Rocha is going to be joining us, please. Excuse me, Mattson. Sorry. Apologize. Welcome, Corey.
One fell through our emails over the holidays. So this is since the King County levy passed in November, we got all cities will get King County levy funding, and with the new levy that they did pass, we got an increase as well. So like 100,000 plus a year for each. So
Yep.
Colleagues, any questions for Ms. Mattson? Deputy Mayor Furtani.
Right. Same question that I always ask all of you, which is we're taking money here, right?
yeah, this is just levy funding. I think it was a total of like $1,500,000 over the 6-year. So we get a lump sum each year, which is about the 260,000.
Vice Chair Golden.
I'll ask a similar question as before. You mentioned about the holiday break. Is there some time sensitivity to us approving this?
I think King County would like it sooner rather than later. So it'd be nice to pass it tonight. I think if we waited till the next meeting, it will be okay. But this is just goes to our ongoing maintenance or new park projects or well, whichever we need.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, any other questions for Ms. Mattson? What's your pleasure, folks? Once again, we love receiving money, and I misspoke when I said other people's money because this is actually our money coming back to. So we'd like it to come back to us. Deputy Mayor Furtani.
All right, I'd like to waive the three-touch rule on Resolution 26-2858, authorizing the mayor to sign the King County Parks Property Tax Levy Agreement for 2026 to 2031 and to place it on the consent agenda for the next business meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's Been moved and seconded to suspend the three-touch rule for resolution 26-2058 and place it on the consent calendar for the next business meeting. Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Madison. Appreciate your time. Okay. Any items, council discussion? Any other business? Okay. Council member reports. I don't know whether anyone has attended any additional or council committee reports. Anyone's attended any regional meetings or? Yes, Deputy Mayor Tony.
Yeah, a brief one. Some of you have heard that there's been a reorganization by the new county executive of the King County Executive Climate Office. Yes, it is not going to be under the executive anymore. It's going to be under a department. And so there's going to be some shuffling around, which means that for now, the King County Cities Climate Collaboration, the K4C meetings, are being sponsored, I believe, by Mercer Island. And so we'll be doing that for a couple of months until the executive has reorganized the office. The K4C is mandated by county law, so it's not like we can't not meet. So we will continue meeting, and unfortunately, we didn't have a meeting this week, so I have nothing to report.
Vice Chair Goldman.
The tree board met last night, but I already mentioned that. Something I just wanted to highlight, when we adopted our biennial budget amendments last month, we approved funding for a climate coordinator. And I just wanted to highlight for the community that we are actively advertising that position. So I'm hoping that we'll have a new climate coordinator in the near future.
Yeah. Thank you. Councilmember Riddle.
Budget and Finance Chair, we did not have a Budget and Finance meeting, and we will not have one in January to allow Finance Chair time to wrap up end of year work.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any other? Councilor Rosenau.
I'll just note that there is a work party at Blue Heron Park this Saturday to do more restoration work that's organized by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. And I believe there is also that same day through the Stewardship Foundation at 5 Acre Woods.
Yeah.
So pick and choose.
Anyone else? Councilor Goldman, you were starting to raise your hand, or?
That actually reminded me, sorry, which day was the Blue Heron work party?
I think they're both on Saturday.
Yeah.
Also on Saturday, Saturday morning at 10:30 at Third Place Commons, there's a presentation, I think a panel discussion about the climate.
Yes.
So that's hopefully that doesn't conflict with the work party.
Looks at both.
It's good.
Yes, please, Deputy Mayor.
I want to amend Councilmember Vice Chair Goldman's statement, which is that it's sponsored by the Lake Forest Park Climate Hub.
Well, how cool is it? That's probably an understatement that we have all these different volunteer events going on at the same time, competing for people. So way to go, LFP. Any other council member reports or council committee reports?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just wanted to remind the council that the joint meeting with the planning commission is on Tuesday.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
there's no committee of the whole meeting on Monday.
Yeah, so check your calendars early and often. So we have a joint meeting with the planning commission on Tuesday. And this is a segue into some of the things I was going to mention here too. The inauguration is on January 24th, the Lake Forest Park Civic Club. Once again, it's an opportunity for us to celebrate our democracy and celebrate you all for being willing to serve your community. What's our time on that, Mr. McLean?
Should be starting 4:30.
4:30. Okay. I'm certain that the team would not turn down volunteers if people want to help out with that. And I did find my blue tablecloths, Matt. So if you need blue tablecloths, I found it. Yes, Vice Goldman.
On the topic of the joint meeting with the planning commission, the way that's going to work is on Tuesday from 7 to 8 will be the joint meeting, and then from 8 to 9 will just be the standard planning commission meeting. Homework that I would like to assign to my fellow council members, the purpose of the joint meeting is for us to essentially have a roundtable discussion, council members, planning commissioners. What are our priority items for 2026? What do we want the planning commission to be working on? In addition, being mindful of the critical work that they have to do. So what else might we want them to prioritize? So I would ask my fellow council members to have a think about that over the weekend so that we can have a productive discussion on Tuesday.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Good, did you start to raise your hand?
No, I'm just
Okay.
agreeing.
Okay. Just make sure I didn't miss you. Let's see. And then council retreat is coming up in February. So that's late in the month. That's our
21st.
21st. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Couple other, let's see. Yeah, lots of things going on right now. I won't blather on here as I want to do sometimes, but I do want to continue to express my optimism about the things that this city continues to do. Our volunteers, great group of volunteers, continues to just shine out there in the community and regionally in leadership roles. And I know you all do have a lot of leadership roles, and some new folks are jumping into leadership roles. I think it's absolutely imperative that we continue to work on the good work that is necessary despite the face of some obstacles in other parts of the country and globally. And I know that the elected officials around this region that I've interacted with to a person are very excited about the new county executive. I know there's some changes. Sometimes change is difficult, but I for one, am thrilled that Executive Zilai has taken his seat there at the county, and I know he's going to do a fantastic job. As I indicated before, I had the pleasure of serving on his transition committee, and I know that the team that he's assembled is going to do a fantastic job. So looking forward to great things. We have a bunch of light rail stations opening up coming. We have all sorts of amazing regional things that are happening. And so a very wise person sitting next to me said, let's focus on the positive things that we can control. So those are things we can influence. And, 2025 may have been a bit of a dumpster fire in some levels, and that's probably an understatement. But let's continue to do the good work. And I know that we will continue to move forward as a community and as neighbors and as friends. So I do appreciate your service very much. And I will leave it there. Administrator Hill, you get the last word.
Well, it won't be as meaningful as what you just said, but just a reminder that the excuse me, legislative session begins this coming Monday. We'll be tracking that, working with Shelley Helder, with Gordon Thomas Honeywell. If you have any bills of interest, you hear any rumblings, please let me know. We'll track down any information we can get for you. And we'll also be sending out the weekly update that we get from Shelley and her group.
Thank you, Administrator Hill. Anything else for the good of the order? Thank you, everybody, for a great evening. Appreciate your time. We're adjourned.
It's a bit that we got a flaw.
Yeah.